Welcome back to my garage. In the previous video we broke a piston ring. We just slightly broke off a tip here. And we lost 3 horsepower, and putting in a new piston and ring didn't bring that back. Now I did 3 runs, like run-in runs, and that was it. So it might be the ring and the new piston, like the ring isn't properly seated yet. That could be it. Could also be as I did a test with a shorter straight intake versus the bent intake you see here. It might be I positioned the carb lower or higher in relation to this surge tank, which is like the float chamber, even though it's a pump around system. And so I'm checking now the level of this, and it's sitting pretty much flush with the carb top, and and this looks to be sitting vertical, so that'll be the baseline. But it could be this was sitting 5 millimeters higher, 5 millimeters lower, even more, like 5 millimeters up or down here. This is sitting at an approximate 85 millimeter radius. So just 3 degrees of rotation up or down of this when I mounted it back could mean a substantial fueling difference. Could mean. It really depends on how hard the engine is sucking on that orifice versus how much the pressure plays a role here. And I think the pressure plays a huge role compared to a smaller carb on a tiny engine like this, cause the signal at the orifice would be much smaller. This is a 34 millimeter carb on a 50cc engine, so the signal at the orifice should be much smaller. Well, that's the only reason this can be used, this huge carb with the same, actually just a little bit larger jets versus what it's meant for. And it's meant for a 500 cubic single cylinder methanol burning 4-stroke. You saw how rusted the internals of my engine was, well, especially the conrod. I am purging, so after every session here, every day out here, I run gas through the engine with oil in it. I've upped the oil content from looking at the inside of it, but I think this is sufficient. The problem, I think, was the first batch of fuel, which probably held lots of water. I'm not sure when that ring end broke, and I'm not sure if that huge ring gap really made a difference. It might be we just lost power from trying the shorter carb, and it might be that shorter carb, shorter inlet length actually is better or just as good. It's just that we moved the carb in relation to the fuel height. The float, like imagine racing the float level. I'm gonna do a little warm up, 3 runs, and let it cool down. Warm up, 3 runs, and just repeat that a couple of times, and see if we can see a difference, if the ring is seated already or if it needs a little more time. We're hovering around 30 horsepower. And now I'm going to lower the chamber 5 millimeters and see if that makes a difference. I wonder if we want to put that chain tensioner back just to make things a little less violent here. Okay, let's try but the other way around. 6.5 millimeters richer. the level of the chamber in relation to the carb had shifted down to flush again. I'm not sure, something must have been hung up or something when I adjusted it. So now I've made sure that's not the case, and we'll have to do the previous test again. And of course we haven't seen any gain in power yet. Okay, let's try the other way around again, in case that was flawed too. As nothing is helping. It could be like temperature differences in the coolant, stuff like that, but it wouldn't be as severe as this. I think the main bearings probably, or the big end bearing, something is starting to become worn out, and it's probably that rust after all that water logged fuel. What I'm doing now is I'm gonna make a trigger wheel for the dyno roller with higher resolution, because it has one trigger point now, and that's much lower than what your dyno really wants. And I think that means it tries to calculate acceleration many times when there's no new signal, and it creates noisy spikes. So I'm just gonna make an adapter for this sprocket. But we're going to machine this sprocket too, to make it true and to make the tooth even. .9. Oh, the solvents in layout fluid, they're not healthy, I think. Cord, I want 3 holes, so the cord is 58 too. I calculated that earlier, so you don't think I'm a freak. Let's see how it goes. Yep, that fits. It's not perfect, it's good. New trigger wheel setup. It's earlier I just had a bolt screwed into the axle and so one trigger point. Now there's 56 per revolution. So this will probably, it's just an improvement, but won't make much of a difference, I think. Shouldn't. What I think will make a difference is replacing the crank bearings. There's always been a little bit of slop in them. Little bit of play, because they're I think they're actually C4 clearance. It said C3, but then I googled the SKF number and it says C4H. Anyways, even if it was C4, the absolute maximum for C4 is 35 microns, so 0.035. And you can see here, that's at the bottom, that's at the top. So we have over 0.1 millimeters of play. You can hear it. I think this is partly rust particles doing this, like the bearings have rusted from that waterlogged fuel, but it might also be ingesting foreign materials, because there's so much dust and swarf around here. I'm gonna make, actually I think I'm gonna make the carb downdraft, and then it's easy to mount a filter up over the frame here, because there's not much room back here. And moving it closer to the floor was not a good idea. I should have cleaned up the area better and made some kind of because there's so much wind from that from the dyno, and that could easily have blown some chips into the carb. You can see where it's been wearing the anodizing down. In the middle, that's where the... I probably want to cut some grooves here to get oil into that area. Because there's contact, continuous contact there versus here. So I'm gonna give that a little... I'm gonna give this a few oil grooves. Well, at least the piston looks brand new, which it is. You know, I think the rod is good. And there's very little axial play. Maybe this is user error. During assembly, it might be I shimmed it too tight. So there's been, when everything heated up, there's been extra strain on the main bearings. That could be the reason for this. So they wore out prematurely. Whoa. Easy boy. Well, the bearing feels looser than... It's really dry. Pretty dry. And it's not rough. It feels looser than it should feel. The first thing I was afraid of was the crank being knackered, but it's the big end is good, the bearing looks mint, the small end is still good, and the bearing surfaces on the shafts are good. It's just surface rust from the methanol and the water in the fuel. Piston is still fine, and it seems like the ring has sealed or seated well, because it's you can see the difference in color between the top of the piston over the ring and then under it. The cylinder looks fine. There's nothing... There's some vertical grooves, but you can't feel them, you can see them. And that's probably from ingesting dust. I'm gonna make some kind of a filter arrangement. You can see the corrosion. It's a weird... It's not corrosion on the bearing, but there's some gray stuff here. There's a little bit here, but there's much more. Much more. Just talking in my notes again. There, down into the mouth. There's much more on this bearing, and also here. But this is kind of weird because it almost looks like ash. I think I've talked about these bearings before because I kind of got deja vu when I googled the numbers here. But these are like pretty normal radial ball bearings. They have small balls for high RPM and small balls for their size. And the clearance is CS32, and that means special clearance, and that's 32, that's microns. So that's 32 microns of axial clearance, and that's the upper range of C4. So these should be suitable for the application. They're probably meant for something high speed, and we'll put a new seal in there. Okay, I'll press out the bearings and we'll clean the case halves and get the new bearings in there. So 0.2. I'm making it 0.2 millimeters more radial clearance, axial clearance. Christ. Okay. And 0 on this side. We don't have the 0.1 millimeter plate we had earlier, so that's good. So I'll let this cure overnight and we'll assemble the rotary valve and all that, and then test fire again. Try to keep it from ingesting so much crap, I've converted to downdraft. Hopefully it won't make a difference, and also hopefully the big hunking filter and velocity stack won't make a difference to the tune. Well, if it does, hopefully it's for the better. I'm not going to mount this direct, like this won't be hanging off the carb. That's what this tab is for. So it's gonna hold the filter to the dyno frame. So this will be kind of floating over there. Funny size carton filter for a 50cc. I'll get this bolt in there and I'll give you a better view. So now we have a big honking filter. Hopefully that's big enough to not interfere, to not make us lose power and not interfere with like resonance stuff. One thing I'm concerned about now is all that fuel spewing out of the carb. That'll be contained and will end up in the carb now. It'll make it richer outside of the power band, so hopefully that won't make it hard to start or something like hard to make it run. I'm gonna put the chain tensioner back on, even though that was a variable. We're gonna test with the chain tension. We're gonna keep it on for now, just make things a little less sketchy. A bunch of variables at once here now, unfortunately. We have the downdraft card, but kind of necessary to not destroy the engine. I think as there's so much dust and swarf and stuff around here. We have the 56 tooth trigger wheel, chain tensioner. I don't think that'll make much of a difference, maybe a positive one. I didn't see anything different with it earlier. And better for the chain. New main bearings, and now there's no slop in there versus 0.1 millimeters earlier. Hopefully the bearings will last. We'll take it a little easy because there's grease and stuff in them now, just to warm them up and clean out that grease, get some oil in there, all that. The connection to the battery pack came loose, it vibrated loose. So I think we were running far too rich there. I think that was, first I thought it was the filter, but I think it was just that, so that it didn't return fuel. I'm wearing a mask, so sorry about the voice. So the problem with the pump not running, as you can see here, is you'll get all of this head pressure versus just this. So you can see how it sucks it in. And even if the fuel is on, there's no fuel. This is the vent hose. First of all, it seems to be running super rich with the filter and downdraft, and it's super low pressure today. and high humidity. So this is our graphs, and they're ugly compared to what they used to be. Like this is one of the good runs. So power is down, it's running rich. It might not be showing correctly because looking at I'm going back to the single trigger, because then there's no, this is probably because of run out and probably some like variations in distance between tooth, stuff like that. And there's no reason for me to run more than one trigger point. It's an inertia dyno. There's no brake having to cope with changes and stuff like that. Then start pulling out fuel and we'll see what happens. Hopefully we can get back to our numbers. Hopefully we're not sitting at like 27.8 now and that's it. Would have been sad. Hopefully we won't end up like a soft dial with nothing fixes anything, because now we replace those bearings and hopefully the results are better than this. I think I've found what might be hopefully I've found what might be the problem. These plug cables like these with these plug caps, they need to be pushed super far down onto the plug. And for some reason I forgot how they really click. Like that. Of course they do. And I haven't heard that click. I haven't heard that click when putting that cap on. And I've put them down to like there. But if you look at the cap, for that to really butt up against this, which will be sitting butted up against the silicone there, they have to pretty much cover the writing. Like probably just cover the whole white piece, the whole ceramic. And I think it's been the same here. So I bought some oxide cleaner and I've oxide cleaned everything now. I've also bought some better chain lube. I've used this bike dry lube and it's super runny and, well, it's not usable for high speed, of course. This is super sticky and hopefully my chains will be happier now. Anyways, I think maybe this could be our problem. And I've bought some fresh spark plugs. It is suspicious how my plugs are getting much darker and there's black stuff on them. I haven't been like that earlier. I think the connection, I think sparking in here and like I think sparking on both ends, because there was lots of gray residue there, caused a worsening condition. So hopefully this will fix that. So I've got some Vaseline spray to apply to the contacts to prevent corrosion and sparking. And I'm going to use some dielectric grease on the caps to make it easier for this to slide in and make it easier for the caps to slide onto stuff. And dielectric grease on the caps is probably a good idea regardless. Forgot to press record. Same treatment up here and it really clicked on. So now I'm excited. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to try to go a lot leaner, 50 millimeters lower. We could lose power, we could gain power, we could melt the plug, we could melt the piston. We'll see. I need to buy a new EGT probe and hook the head temp sensor back up because we need some data. Like it's hard. It would have been easier with some data. You might remember the reason I removed the EGT probe was interference, but now it's broken. I made like a homemade one. It wasn't meant for that high temperature. So going leaner made a difference, but it didn't. Well, I'll show you. So let's start with this is the good run from the good day when we made 32 horsepower after fixing up the things sliding around on the engine dyno. Just before we switched to the short intake, we lost 2 horsepower with the short intake. So same conditions as with as from this run, and then we never gained back those horsepower, and we even lost 1 more. So after rebuilding the whole engine, new bearings, everything, checking over everything is fine. We ran the downdraft carb, and you can see how 3 horsepower gone. So pretty much same conditions. Well, that's with the filter and all that, but let's pull up a run. So fresh piston, 16mm stinger. So that's making more power versus now, actually. Maybe that was a particularly good one. Nope, they're all sitting there. There, there, there. So then today, fresh plugs, thought I fixed the problem, and we have these runs. Seems to be ignition problems, really. The pipe is getting smaller from residue. Nah, just seems weird. It's so weird. It is so weird. I have the carb apart just to see that, well, mainly to see if that thing had slipped, but it doesn't look like it. Now, unfortunately, I didn't record. That's the depth of the plunger, kind of like the needle in a normal carb. I didn't record the position of that earlier, I think. I know I recorded the position of that, the needle I made for it, but I've recorded the position now. But I don't think this is the problem, because at wide open, this is just wide open, like there's no, it's just a wide open 4mm hole in there, and there's a 3.5mm jet here. The carb is fine. I think I found, well, hopefully I found a problem. It's a weird one, but I think it's pretty much the only difference between the earlier when we did that run, the runs where we made 32 horsepower, we switched to the short intake, and then we switched back, and no difference except for one thing changed. So let's say this is our ignition coil, just to the spark plug wire. There's a primary, which is a coil of fairly thick wire, and it's not wound around the core that much. And then there's a coil of thin wire, that's the secondary, and it has several more windings, like 100 to 1 in this case. This isn't important for what we're talking about here. What is important is the magnetic field this coil creates when, well, it creates all the time, but especially when that magnetic field collapses, because that's what causes all the EMI from a coil. That's why you run a resistor plug. And that looks kind of like this. Like it's oriented in this fashion. So there's a directionality to this. Say this is something that can't tolerate EMI. EMI will be different if the coil is sitting like this versus like this. Now, what's better? That's hard to say for. Because there's a bunch of wires and stuff, and I'm not sure what I think can't tolerate the interference. And here's the difference. So here's the Ignitec box. It sits here, and here are all the wires, especially the sensor wire runs here. And here's the ignition coil. And up until after we did the short intake, this had been sitting like this. That's because I moved this fuel stand around. But after the short intake, after we moved that, I think I watched some pictures and tried to see in the earlier videos. I haven't seen the current footage from this video, so I can't know for sure. But I'm pretty sure it's been sitting like this all the time after the short intake testing. So now we're going to try to orient the coil like this. As I'm very much running out of fuel again, we have to do this quick. So we're going to start with trying just that different orientation. And we're going to move the car back to its original position without the filter, without just exactly the same. So we'll just have to ingest stuff. If it doesn't work after a few runs, we're going to put a resistor cap in series with a resistor plug. No, I think we're back in business now. I think what's going on now is the pressure and humidity today. It's much worse than last time. Well, from that 32 horsepower run. And now I think it's running a little rich. And that's why it's not revving, but you can see how it's up there and wants to go up to peak power. The last run there, I think that was when it was getting hotter and wanted even less fuel. I think. Well, I'm not sure, like alcohol, not sure. Could be ignition trouble. We're gonna try the resistor spark plug now. Finally, I'm pretty sure we got a big clue there towards what's going on. So let me see here. Ta-da! That's our huge stinger right there. Not super beautiful. That's mostly because I was trying to, well, I need to practice my ending the welds, and also I was missing my mark and had to re-weld. But I like how the heat affected zone is so small with this with laser welding. That's pretty cool. I think that's good for, probably good against cracking and stuff, hopefully. If you happen to have a little bit of nitro just kicking about that you want to get rid of, or if you have a license so that you can buy it in Sweden, please let me know, because I have methanol. But so either we'll see no change at all now, or we'll be back to our 32 horsepower or even more. The problem now is all the testing I've done since that started cracking and we started having a leak there is pretty much void. Like there's no, I can't tell. It explains all the weird like inconsistencies, but it's annoying because now we don't know if that shorter intake is worse, and we don't know if any of the things that I thought affected things. So it could be, and stinger testing, the stinger testing, we'll have to do everything again. And we need more fuel, because now we kind of wasted, we probably wasted at least 10 liters of fuel just fooling around with an exhaust leak. We're like around 29-30 horsepower, and I'm frantically trying to figure out what's wrong. So that's at least a better place to have problems versus earlier. Okay, let's see. 17mm stinger. We're pretty much out of fuel. We have maybe enough for a warm-up and 2-3 runs more, but I don't think it's because now the dips in the power band are back, and that's what we had earlier with the normal plugs. And I think it's the resistor cap, but I think it's still, I think the ignition is, there's something, maybe running the Ignitec at 19 volts, which is like almost at the cutoff for over voltage. It says over voltage when it's on. Maybe that wasn't such a smart idea. Could be my coil is starting to fail, breaking down, the windings are breaking down. Probably not though, because that's a coil meant for, I think it's meant for running with distributors and in V8s, probably at, like if a V8 at 5,000 RPM is 20,000 RPM for this 2-stroke, a V8 4-stroke. So I think that's, well, maybe it's fine, I don't know. We're gonna test it on gas. That's what we're gonna do, because then it'll be easier to, then the ignition system will probably most likely cope. And also with how cool the exhaust gases are on this fuel, we're peaking at 16,000, but we have a port area for closer to 18, 19, which means gas might not make as little power compared to this as you think. At least that's what I think. We'll see. We'll see you next time. See you next time.